Hello and welcome to Team Reptile Adventures. On a previous episode of Team Reptile Adventures, we were fortunate enough to be able to join up with two biologists who were doing a study of the eastern Massasauga rattlesnakes that inhabit Indian Springs Metro Park in southeastern Michigan. This study is being conducted through Indiana-Purdue University, which is located in Fort Wayne, Indiana. Joe and Aaron are the biologists doing the field research for the Massasauga here at Indian Springs, and they were nice enough to let myself and a couple of other Team Reptile members tag along a couple of times as they collected data on Michigan's only species of rattlesnake. Because this snake is so reclusive and because the study requires individual snakes to be monitored, it meant that some of the Massasaugas here in the park had radio transmitting devices implanted in them, which made it easier for Joe and Aaron to be able to track them. The data that Joe and Aaron collected would then be sent back to Dr. Bruce Kingsbury at Indiana-Purdue University. Dr. Kingsbury is the chair of the biology department there and is also in charge of the study of the eastern Massasauga rattlesnake at Indian Springs Metro Park, as well as at a few other sites. We got an opportunity to sit down with Dr. Kingsbury to find out why the study of the eastern Massasauga rattlesnake is so important, as well as why this location was chosen as a research site.
We are conducting a radio telemetry study here at Indian Springs Metro Park, and we're very excited about it for several reasons. One of the reasons is the population here is reasonably large, and that's not always easy to find. Another reason from an ecological perspective is that we know that this population has individuals that move into upland areas away from the wetlands during the summer, and studying these animals here will allow us to compare what they do in these sorts of circumstances to other research areas where they stay right in the wetlands. Another reason we're very interested in this area is because there's construction that's going on for an environmental education center, and so we get to see what the snakes do in response to the construction activity. After they are done with the construction, they're also going to restore the habitat in this area to demonstrate a variety of prairie, grassland sorts of areas and wetlands and that sort of thing. And this provides us with a very interesting opportunity over the next several years to watch how the snakes respond to this restoration effort.
We really appreciated Dr. Kingsbury taking the time to sit down and explain more about the eastern Massasauga rattlesnake study here at Indian Springs Metro Park, and we were getting very excited about what he had in store for us next. As I had mentioned earlier, Joe and Aaron used radio transmitters to track the snakes in the park. Sometimes a snake gets discovered that is not already a part of the study, and that means that it needs to have a radio transmitter implanted in it. Lucky for us, Joe and Aaron had found a Massasauga recently that had not been a part of the study, and Dr. Kingsbury was nice enough to allow us to observe the surgery to implant one of these radio transmitters into this snake. We're now in one of the back offices here at Indian Springs Metro Park, where Dr. Kingsbury is getting set to begin the surgery to implant a radio transmitter into this eastern Massasauga rattlesnake.
We can sex it. And if it's a male, the probe goes in because that's where the hemipenes are located. So it is a male.
I feel really fortunate to even be involved here with this surgery today with this Massasauga rattlesnake. And I'd really like to thank Dr. Kingsbury, Joe, Aaron, and the staff here at Indian Springs Metro Park for all their help and for even allowing us just to be a part of this today. So that Dr. Kingsbury could safely handle this rattlesnake during the operation, he first put it in a bucket filled with anesthesia and let it sit there for a while until it put it in a motionless state. Now it was time for Dr. Kingsbury to get some measurements of both the snake's body length and also the length of its rattle.
$44 and a half, just shy of 44 and a half. And just over 5.
So we now know this male snake weighs 104 grams and has a total body length of about 44 and a half centimeters.
And this snake might be in its second year. You can see how the rattles the segments get small really quickly. This is a really young snake.
That's one way to tell age, just by how quickly the rattle tapers.
Well, just as an approximation of whether or not it's a real old individual. If they're really old, then the segments are all the same size because the old ones have cracked off.
Oh, how often does that happen where they lose a segment?
Oh, all the time.
Really? So they're pretty brittle, fragile?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, they're just like paper, I guess. Stuff is that's not.
That was something I wondered about because you never see them with like this gigantic rattle, you know?
Yeah, real long rattles are unusual
Yeah.
because they are kind of fragile.
That big female had a pretty big rattle on her. She had like 9 or 10 segments on
Yeah.
it.
Now, Dr. Kingsbury, what exactly is the reason for this surgery?
We are going to put this transmitter inside the snake, which at the moment looks like it would never fit, but when we're done, it should be not even noticeable that it's in there. Kind of as though that he ate a little meal.
Dr. Kingsbury was now ready to begin the surgery and make the first cut to implant the radio transmitter into this snake.
What's surprising about this is that they actually almost never bleed, or at least not very much.
So the incision's actually on the side, so you're not using the
Right.
belly scoots or the
Right, I try to avoid the scoots.
As Dr. Kingsbury cut further along the side of the snake, it began to show signs that the anesthesia had not taken full effect yet. The movements of the snake here told Dr. Kingsbury that this snake needed a little more anesthesia, so he decided to put it back in the bucket for a short time before continuing the surgery. After a short time in the bucket of anesthesia again, the snake was once again ready, as was Dr. Kingsbury, to proceed with the surgery.
A rinse.
Okay.
It was in the betadine is a little bit too nasty.
Okay.
Gotta find my little hole in there.
I can definitely see why Dr. Kingsbury said this radio transmitter looks too big to fit in the snake's body, but I guess we're about to find out. It is very interesting to watch Joe and Aaron track the Massasaugas from their study here in the park. The radio transmitter sure makes it easier to find the snake's general location, but then you need to locate it visually. If you've seen our episode doing this with Joe and Aaron, then you know it's not always easy. These snakes are camouflaged so well to match their environment, and they often burrow down in vegetation or underground, making it almost impossible to find them. Well, it looks like Dr. Kingsbury was able to get that radio transmitter in after all.
I think what's interesting is that when you first start to put it in, it looks like it'll never go. But now already it's like it's gone.
Now, does the snake show any signs of sensing that it has this this big
Yeah.
radio transmitter in it?
Typically no, especially this kind. When you watch, if you watch a species that kind of has a real sinusoidal locomotion, sometimes they have a little, looks like they have a slight kink in there. But these guys, they don't crawl around that way, they just crawl straight, and so you can never tell. In fact, people, you pick them up later and you don't realize right away that it actually has a transmitter in it.
Now, what is that you're inserting right now?
This is actually just a piece of wire I'm using to form a guide for the antenna wire.
Is it hollow inside?
No, actually that's what a lot of people use, but actually mine, I have a little twist on that technique, although that's a perfectly good one.
As you can see, Dr. Kingsbury is actually pushing that wire through the side of the Massasauga and feeding it through using his hands to kind of guide it along. And then what he's able to do is attach the antenna wire to the wire that's already inserted in the snake and then gently pull it all the way through and kind of guide it until it's all the way out the other end.
Just put a hole in the knife and snap it through it.
Oh,
Now, how long will you guys keep the snake in captivity before you release it back in the wild?
Let's see, what day is today?
Friday.
Friday, so about middle of the week. Joe could just watch the weather, and in 5 days or so, if it was nice weather, he could just go ahead and let it go. Now what I've found with a different species that I just watched to see how their behavior changed after surgery, and they do some odd things the first couple days, as you might expect, but really it's hard to tell any difference within about 2 or 3 days. And once we've released the snakes back into the field, we've seen that they go right back to mating and foraging and crawling all over the place. So I've always been really impressed at how minimal the impact seems to be, which is one of the reasons I like that technique so much. And they also seem to be really resistant to infection. I'm not worried about them getting infected. Our biggest concern with these kinds of things is transmitting a disease from one population to another, or from one species to another. That's always been a worry of mine, and when we hear about monkeypox and things like that, then that sort of validates that concern. So what I try to do is make things really clean in between handling different populations and different species.
Is this the disintegrating gut here?
Yep, it's a absorbable suture.
Okay, so this wouldn't interfere with a snake shedding if we're going to shed with it very
Right.
soon.
Typically not, although
That one that we had in the aquarium shed,
Oh,
and he had one small patch of skin left where the incision was.
Oh, okay.
And I'm sure it's probably there because of the super glue that he's putting on there
Right.
now. I'm sure it'll fall right off in a
Yeah.
few days.
I think that's only an issue if they shed right after we do this. What's interesting though is a lot of the snakes that we do capture are getting ready to shed. Have you noticed
Yeah,
that?
yeah. This time of year.
I just did 3 snakes for another study site a couple of days ago, and all 3 of them had shed in their aquarium.
Well, we've had 2. I had that shed right there from a couple of days ago, and I keep finding snakes with cloudy eyes, so it seems to be the time of the year.
The time of the year, and I think also the behavior of the snake changes, that they spend more time trying to get warm when they're getting ready to shed.
That's another thing I noticed is they shed and then they move. Like that snake right there, that shed right there, she
No.
stayed in the same spot for weeks, and then she shed and she's moved now.
You've noticed that with Massasaugas and also with timber rattlesnakes, that they seem to have certain places or certain kinds, not necessarily places, but certain more exposed habitats where they hang out for a while getting ready to shed, and then once they're done they move on.
If you were to give me your best guesstimate, how many surgeries would you say you've done now on snakes?
Wow. 400 or 500. I've done a lot. I can definitely say that I'm comfortable doing it. And then I can also say that hasn't always been true. I was definitely much more nervous about this, even though it's a pretty straightforward procedure. I've seen a lot of what can go wrong now, so when things happen I just adjust and keep going, and typically everything's fine.
What are some of the complications you can run into in the surgery?
Well, for some species they bleed a little bit, although typically really not very much, but as we see with the Massasauga, it didn't bleed a single drop. I mean, there's the iodine here, but we saw absolutely no blood, and that's pretty typical for Massasaugas. The biggest risk during the surgery is actually the anesthesia, and occasionally there are individuals that don't recover from the anesthesia, but knock on wood, that hasn't happened for a couple of years, so we've been very successful. Otherwise, that's about it. It's pretty straightforward if you know what you're doing. Let's see, I think I'll do a little artwork.
Yeah. I put some white out on that big female's tail the
Yeah.
other day. So if we see her again, we'll at least know it was her.
The reason for this, and this just tells Joe, he's handled this snake before, and so it doesn't tell us who the snake is, but if he sees it in the grass, then he knows that it's potentially has a transmitter in it and deserves special attention. And then we'll use a little when I first started using this, I just went out to the store and I bought super glue. This is actually almost the same thing. In fact, it is my understanding that super glue was originally designed to close sutures, close cuts, and then only later did it become generally commercially used.
Yeah,
So that's kind of nifty.
It was used during Vietnam. That's where it was
Yeah.
developed from. But what's the difference with this? I mean, could you
It
use
has-
the regular, or does it have antibiotics or
No,
something?
there are probably some aspects like purity and all that kind of thing, but what I like about it is it's easy to dispense, and it has a very low viscosity, so I can really meter how much I put on there.
And what's this stuff, or is it in here?
Just medical super glue.
Oh.
Alright.
Do a fang demo.
Yeah, probably need to show off some fangs here.
Yeah.
Dr. Kingsbury is actually going to show us
You leave any of the other plants?
the fangs of the Massasauga.
One of the neat things about snakes is that they have a lot of flexibility in the joints in their head, what's called cranial kinesis. And that allows them to eat very large objects that are much bigger than their head. For example, they have, if you look at the two bottom jaws here, they're independent of one another. So they can actually kind of march their teeth up a mouse when they eat it. It also allows them to extend their fangs. So there's the fang, and so it starts out folded against the roof of their mouth. They open their mouth and then they can stick their fang out. And if we're careful, we can expose the fang. And they have replacements lined up in here, ready to come out. Should this one crack off, they can pull out another one, and in a few days or perhaps a little bit longer, they're ready to go again. They breathe through the epiglottis right there. It's closed right now. The snake is holding its breath. And the tongue gets pulled out from right here, so it's retracted as well. And maybe the other interesting thing is reptiles don't have a nasal cavity. Their nostrils, there's the nostril right there, opens right into the roof of the mouth. And that's also up where the Jacobson's organ is located, in that area.
Can you tell us a little bit about the Jacobson organ?
Well, it's a device for perceiving chemical cues. It's a little bit like taste and smell, but a lot of times it has to do with tracking food or tracking other snakes. But it's kind of like taste, but just a little bit different. The other thing that we can point out here, right there, is one of the infrared sensing thermal pits that the snake has. So there's the eye with the vertical pupil, the heat sensitive pit, and the nostril. And it can see heat in stereo because it has these heat sensitive pits on either side of the face. So even in the dark they can try to look for food. Alright, you can relax your jaw now.
Now, how long before the snake will actually begin to come to and move a little more? Are they actually completely out, or are they just...
Well, they're completely knocked out from the muscle perspective. Here's breathing right there. And what I did just a moment ago by pressing on it was to just try to flush out the anesthetic a little bit. But it's breathing fine on its own. And if we're really lucky, actually this snake looks like it just shed.
Yeah, it did. In the aquarium.
The heart is right here. You might be able to see the heartbeat. Oh, there's a breath. I can see it, but it's pretty faint. I don't know if the camera will pick that up. It's a little glint on the scales. But this is a subadult male, and I think it's in its second or third summer.
A lot of people ask us about aging them. Bruises are away in the beginning on some of these.
Well, they certainly will shed several, depends on the year, but they'll shed several times a year. This one, you can look at the rattle, and these rattles are much larger than these down here, and that to me suggests the snake's getting bigger fast right now, whereas a big adult, all the rattles, all the segments are about the same size because they break, so you can't base it on how many years old they are.
So this is possible that this tip right here is the one he was born with?
I don't think it is, but I think it's one of the first ones.
Okay.
Are they born with the button?
Yeah, they're born with a little button on the end.
Okay. I didn't think they were.
And they're venomous right from the time they're born, aren't they?
Right. They come out loaded.
So what's the typical recovery time as far as waking up and anesthesia?
This one actually, if we bugged it a little bit, I
They would start to-
wouldn't be surprised if it might be able to hold its head up or just kind of slowly turn.
I'm glad I know that now.
Oh, I'll even pick them up when they're moving because they're so out of it.
Data.
It's kind of like they're totally like in a drunken state.
Wow, was that exciting. That was just awesome. I am so thankful that we got to be included in this surgery today of the Eastern Massasauga Rattlesnake, having that radio transmitter implanted in, which it was neat to see because we've been hanging out with Joe and Aaron so much, going around tracking the rattlesnakes, and I wondered how they got those little transmitters in. Of course, they didn't look that low when they were going in. But I really want to give a big thank you to Dr. Kingsbury, to Joe, to Aaron, to the staff here at Indian Springs Metro Park for just being so great and letting us be a part of this. And I hope that you at home, you got to appreciate what you saw and have a lot more appreciation for that Eastern Massasauga rattlesnake. And hopefully we'll get to do some adventures with them again in the future.